Hello and welcome to the Shakey Sonnet Show. Here we are at the bottom of the down staircase in the permanently sequestered remainders section of an unnamed local library which may or may not have a lion couchant or two resting on the steps just waiting for you to come in and say hello to me in person. If you're new here, I'm Tootight Lautrec. I'm your new Shakespeare sonnet teacher. Welcome. Have yourself a seat. You need nothing. You get all extra credit just for tuning in, and you need nothing except a phone or a computer and a filthy mind, and you're welcome here. Last week we looked at Sonnet 14. Today we're going to look at Sonnets 15 and 16 together because they are linked grammatically. And while last week we saw that in Sonnet 13, we went to you instead of thou for the person who's being addressed in here. And then in 14, last week, we went back to thou. This week, we're back to you again for 15, 16, and 17. And while I'm no linguist, although I do love a foreign tongue, I will recommend this book right here in order to sort out all the ins and outs of the yous and thous situation, which takes a little bit of doing. I have to say, you can't just glance at it once and get it all down pat. This is a book by E.A. Abbott, A Shakespearean Grammar, an attempt to illustrate some of the differences between Elizabethan and modern English, and oh my bard, it's wonderful. Set yourself up right and take a peek inside for any questions you may have about Elizabethan English versus present-day English. Now, it's no secret that I'm a fan of the double entendre, and Sonnets 15 and 16 are absolutely rife with them. So you're going to have to noodle your noggins and look for the most juvenile jokes and puerile puns possible so that you can come along and listen to this broad's way of finding all the naughty bits in Shakespeare's Sonnet 15 and 16. Now, taken together, Sonnets 15 and 16 perform a bit of a bait and a switch, a kind of a sonnetus interruptus, where Sonnet 15 proves the maxim, the pen is mightier than the sword, and Sonnet 16 turns it all on its head and does a complete 69, and basically proves that the penis is mightier than the word. It's true, and they do this with more than a wink and a nod. They do it with a shake and a bounce and a slap and a tickle to boot. Trust me. If you think I'm overplaying it, you can let me know, but I think I'm right on target. Now, if these sonnets were only just sexy little poems, they'd almost hardly be worth looking at. But they are more than that. In fact, Sonnet 15, which is the first one that we'll look at, is indeed a sex-filled poem, which we'll discuss afterwards. But it's also a beautiful, quiet poem with that all-observing eye narrator that we saw in 14 and in 12. You get the sense of a sensitive soul looking out on the world and paying attention to everything that's there, good and bad, and trying to figure out a way to access it all and to make it part of life and make it part of a love poem as well. But on top of everything else, the first 17 poems in this sequence are known as the procreation sonnets, but Sonnet 15 is a complete and total rebel because there's not even a hint at an urging to procreate, and we'll look at that as we go along. So there is maybe a hint, but only just. I'm going to read 15 first, and then we'll talk about it a little bit, and then go on to 16. Sonnet 15. When I consider everything that grows holds in perfection but a little moment, that this huge stage presenteth naught but shows, whereon the stars in secret influence comment. When I perceive that men as plants increase, cheered and checked even by the self-same sky, vaunt in their youthful sap at height decrease, and wear their brave state out of memory. Then the conceit of this inconstant stay sets you most rich in youth before my sight, where wasteful time debateth with decay, to change your day of youth to sullied night. And all in war with time, for love of you, as he takes from you, I engraft you new. So let's go through the more mundane version of this and look at it as if it's just the all-observing eye in a sweet and tender little poem. It has no sexual innuendo whatsoever. When I consider everything that grows, holds in perfection but a little moment. The narrator saying, when I look on the world, I see that all things grow, but when they grow, they're perfect for only a short time, but a little moment. And when I consider that this huge stage, this world in which we live, this huge stage, the earth, presenteth naught but shows whereon the stars in secret influence comment. I'm looking at the entire world, and the stars may or may not influence the things that we do here, but I'm filled with wonder at this huge stage. When I perceive that men, as plants, increase, men grow up, plants grow up, they do the same, they're organic beings and they live and grow. Cheered and checked by the self-same sky, they live under the same sky as plants and grow to be young and healthy, strong, vigorous people. They vaunt in their youthful sap, their blood is high when they reach someone who's perhaps your age, if you're in the bloom of youth. At height, they decrease. They get to a certain pinnacle of beauty and strength, and then it begins to go downhill. And they wear their brave state out of memory. When I consider all of this sonnet is saying, and by the way, this is all one sentence. When I consider all of these things, then the conceit of this inconstant stay, then the idea of this short life that we're here on this earth, the conceit of this inconstant stay sets you most rich in youth before my sight. When I think of all this, everything grows and passes, and I look at you and I understand that you'll grow and pass away too. And here you are now in your youth and the richness of your youth before my sight, where wasteful time debateth with decay. And here, debateth doesn't mean that they argue, it means they rather conspire together. Wasteful time and decay will work their number on you, to change your day of youth to sullied night. The sun will go down and you'll be dark and dead in the grave. And after all of this, all in war with time, for love of you, as he takes from you, I engraft you new. So as time takes away your beauty, I'm writing a poem. As he's taking this away from you, I am making you live forever. My poem is doing the job. There's no talk here of procreation. There's no talk here of another generation. It's I am the one who's going to make you live forever. And in graft, if you have ever seen a botanical graft where you take a shoot from one living plant and basically tape it onto another, that's a different kind of, that's not really procreation. That bypasses the seed in the womb altogether. So it's just a piggybacking of one thing onto another, if you know what I mean, and I think you do. So if we think about this as slightly more sexual, when I consider everything that grows holds in perfection but a little moment, that this huge stage presenteth naught but shows whereon the stars in secret influence comment. When I perceive that men as plants increase, and their penises increase too, cheered and checked by the self-same sky, vaunt in their youthful sap, the sap's right up in there while they're young and vigorous and ready to go, strong and solid like a rock. Then they vaunt in their youthful sap, and at the very height of the moment, they decrease, much like what happens after intercourse. And they wear their brave state out of memory. Then the conceit of this inconstant stay, and you could think of a stay as a garter or a buckle, sets you most rich in youth before my sight. I mean, here we are. Nature takes its course, and you're gorgeous, and and I love you. It won't last forever, but as time takes your youth away from you, even though it's hard to believe, my love for you is fighting against time. And as time takes from you, I engraft you new by writing this poem, and I will keep you alive forever. So one huge, long sentence that's tender and sexy at the same time. And then after we get this big, long sentence, we've got this smooth, voluptuous growth of love, if you will, and I will. We go from that to Sonnet 16, this big, long, flowing, beautiful sentence, which glides off the mouth quite nicely, too. There are a lot of W's, a lot of long A sounds, a lot of long E sounds, not a lot of staccato, hard consonants. We go from that to the first two lines of 16. But wherefore do not you a mightier way make war upon this bloody tyrant time? So you can see that it is an extension of 15 because it starts with the word but wherefore do not you a mightier way? And it's referencing what's just been said. But what a way to kill the mood, right? To this long, flowing, lovely sentence, and then all of a sudden these hard consonants that ends with a question mark, as if to say, is it in yet? I mean, how very dare you? Let's get on with it. I mean, this is not the time to be stopping and asking questions. But let's get the full experience. I'll start with 15 again. Just indulge me, because you have no choice unless you turn off your computer. But you'll see what I mean. And you'll hear the hard, the T's and the D's, the bloody tyrant time and decay, and the barren, the blessed. It's very harsh, considering the beauty of 15. When I consider everything that grows holds in perfection but a little moment, that this huge stage presenteth naught but shows whereon the stars in secret influence comment. When I perceive that men, as plants, increase, cheered and checked even by the selfsame sky, vaunt in their youthful sap, at height decrease, and wear their brave state out of memory, then the conceit of this inconstant say sets you most rich in youth before my sight, where wasteful time debateth with decay, to change your day of youth to sullied night, and all in war with time, for love of you, as he takes from you, I engraft you new. But wherefore do not you a mightier way make war upon this bloody tyrant time, and fortify yourself in your decay with means more blessed than my barren rhyme? Now stand you on the top of happy hours, and many maiden gardens yet unset with virtuous wish would bear your living flowers, much liker than your painted counterfeit. So should the lines of life that life repair, which this time's pencil or my pupil pen, neither in inward worth nor outward fair, can make you live yourself in eyes of men. To give away yourself keeps yourself still, and you must live, drawn by your own sweet skill. So you can hear the difference in the two, not only is 15 much more smooth sounding, it's a much easier poem to understand as well. When you start with 16, but wherefore do not you a mightier way make war upon this bloody tyrant time? Well, suddenly we're in the territory of combat and war. And, I've written you a poem and that will keep you in eternity. And this is kind of spitting on that and saying, well, but there's a stronger way. If you're a real man, there's a stronger way. There's almost like a pulling back of sorts after the tenderness of 15. Why don't you choose a better way to fight this bloody tyrant time and fortify yourself in your decay like a true soldier? Fortify yourself in your decay with means more blessed than my barren rhyme. My rhyme is nothing. It won't do anything. It will only have you being talked about forever and ever by some drag queen 400 years later. Or maybe you should do something else. But I think Shakespeare had the right idea. And with means more blessed than my barren rhyme, I was a bit hung up on that word blessed, because I didn't know if it meant more honored or more blessed by God, because Shakespeare's not that big of a God guy, as far as I can tell. But I looked up the etymology of blessed, and it does mean to sprinkle, consecrate, or hallow with blood. And as we know, blood and semen are metaphorically equivalent. So it does seem to be winking at the idea that there was some other kind of blessing going on in between these two that Sonnet 16 is pulling back from. The second quatrain, now stand you on the top of happy hours and many maiden gardens yet unset. Now, this is interesting because does he stand on top of many happy hours and he stands on top of maiden gardens yet unset? Hard to say because there's a comma after hours. It could be two separate clauses. Now stand you on the top of happy hours and many maiden gardens yet unset with virtuous wish would bear your living flowers. So possibly they're separate, possibly they're not. But basically there's an implication that there are all sorts of virgins out there just waiting for you to plow their fields and engender a race of soldiers just like you. And they would be much liker than your painted counterfeit. They would look more like you than a painted counterfeit. A counterfeit is a portrait. So it would look more like you even than a picture that if we painted it of you, or a picture that we paint of you in a sonnet, for instance. Now, this third quatrain is a bit tricky because the sense, if you take out the, so the third quatrain starts at line 9. If you take line 9 and line 12, you can kind of get the idea of what it's actually saying. So should the lines of life that life repair, which will make you live yourself in the eyes of men. If you choose to follow the line, walk the straight and narrow in one sense, but also if you choose to follow the line, the lineage of your genealogy and continue that lineage, you can live yourself in eyes of men. But there's this qualifier in between with lines 10 and 11, which this time's pencil or my pupil pen neither an inward worth nor outward fair. My pencil and my pupil pen, it's only my 16th sonnet to you, so I'm not all the way up to 154, so I'm not really that well versed in the sonnet making thing. This time's pencil, my pupil pen, neither in inward worth, they're not worthy, and they are not pretty, these sonnets. Neither in inward worth nor outward fair. They're really nothing that can make you live yourself in eyes of men. Rather, the couplet, to give away yourself, and by yourself, your semen, to give away yourself keeps yourself still. You do make a deposit, but you get some interest on that payment because you will have children and they will have children, and on and on and on and on. To give away yourself keeps yourself still, and you must live drawn by your own sweet skill. Well, drawn is an interesting thing. Pencil is an interesting thing. Pen is an interesting thing. Penises are an interesting thing. The penis is mightier than the word in this sonnet. And if you take 15 and 16 together, there is the lovely love sonnet of 15, which has no urgings for this person for the recipient to procreate. And then not just this person, I'll say it, this man, this lad, because men as plants increase, cheered and checked by the selfsame sky, vaunt in their youthful sap, at height decrease. Well, if that's not describing a penis, I don't know what is, although we can talk about that later. But this times pencil or my pupil pen is the same sort of thing. It's like saying, 15 was nice, but here comes 16, and it's sort of that whole no gay though, bro kind of moment where if these sonnets are telling some sort of story, if they are ordered in this particular way, one can't help but make up ideas about what's going on here. And it does seem like 15 was a breakthrough. 15 was some sort of interesting interlude where the whole ruse of procreation was dropped and then immediately taken up again in 16, which is not only the sonnet after it, but it is grammatically linked as well. So it functions as an entire sonnet, but it's a beautiful sonnet and an ugly sonnet in my estimation. And it's a very strange moment in this story, if a story it is. So, could this be a woman in here? I suppose if you really stretched your mind, it could be, but I mean, you'd have to ignore that giant erection in Sonnet 15 and all the pens and pencils and the drawing with your own sweet skill with whatever instrument you choose. But I mean, there's one instrument that works the best for procreation. So I would have to say that I will stick by my horn. And this horn will come to another day. So, dramatic possibilities. I mean, are there any Shakespeare plays where there's a poet? I imagine there are. I do have to look into them. Could it be between two women? It could be a sort of sapphic situation, I suppose. And yes, you have to ignore the thing poking up in the middle of it, or seeming to poke it up, men as plants increase and all that jazz. It could be something like Venus to Adonis, which I also have not read, but should have read for this lesson, but I'll read it and come back to you on that. If you have any ideas of dramatic possibilities for this, feel free to let me know. Ask your other teachers if they have any ideas. Tell them to come along and visit, and they can argue or agree with me to their heart's desire, and we can all have a merry old time together. So, we're almost at the end of the procreation sonnets. Next time we meet, we'll be discussing Sonnet 17, and we'll see where we go from there. Until next time, that's right, remember, the world is full of wonder. As Sonnet 15 shows us, the world is full of wonder. Pay attention to it. Until we meet again, I'm Tootight Lautrec.